Hey, welcome to another episode of the Stick Elliott Show. Today we have one of my favorite bass players and one of my favorite bands, Otis Hughes from Animal Bag. So he was kind enough to do a sit-down interview with us, and he's going to talk about his music career, and he's going to talk about just the experiences he had with Animal Bag and his other bands and upcoming bands. So, Otis, thank you for being a part of the show today.
Sure.
We'll start it off from the very beginning. We want to know where was you born and when did you first get into music?
I was born in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I moved to Charlotte when I was 6. And, my first music I listened to was, I guess, what my mom listened to. I did actually like some cool stuff, like Simon and Garfunkel, the Supremes, stuff like that. But really, back then, I probably liked Frosty the Snowman better. I remember, I also, like in Puerto Rico, there was this guy, and I guess he would be like the equivalent of the Puerto Rican Elvis, and his name was Raphael.
Nice.
And I remember, really liking him when I was, really little. Also, they used to, that show, The Monkees.
Yeah.
It was on the air in Puerto Rico, and it was dubbed in with, Spanish vocals.
Wow.
Except for the songs. But
yeah.
I remember, I loved The Monkees. When I first moved to Charlotte, I was tripping out, watching them in English,
Right.
And watching, there was a couple, Batman in English. Anyway.
That's awesome. So we can, so Raphael was definitely one of your influences, huh?
Well, I wouldn't say he was, but,
He kind of made you want to get on
a real
stage.
early memory, too, for me was, and I was telling somebody about this before, but my mom would take us to she moved here because Eastern Airlines. She worked for Eastern Airlines, and this was a huge Eastern hub back then, late 60s. And but I remember she was taking me to the babysitters, and I was laying, back then kids didn't have to wear seatbelts and stuff, so I was laying in the floor of the car close to the heater, and the song came on, and I didn't know it then, but it was the Beach Boys, and it was called Sloop John B.
Nice.
But I didn't know that then, and I heard that song, and then the chorus, it's like, I want to go home, I want to go home. Yeah. And that's how I felt right then. And
right.
That was the very first time where music was saying something that I felt. And I remember it was my mom turned it off, and I flipped out, turn that back on, turn it back on. Right. And then I didn't hear that song again, until I was a teenager or in my 20s or something.
Right.
But now it's on Pet Sounds, and
right.
Of course I have that, and it's great.
Yeah. So when you got on up into your teen years and stuff, what rock bands did you hear that just blew your mind? And you're like, I've got to be on stage and do this. I mean, this is what I got to do. What bands just reached out and grabbed you and really spoke to you, to pick up an electrical instrument and start your own band?
Well, even before that, I got a radio when I was about 7 years old, so I listened to it all the time, and I loved American Top 40,
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't realize this, but I guess that's why I'm sort of into trivia and stuff now. I would love when he would talk about the bands, in between the songs, he'd
right.
tell you a little bit about the band, Ann and Nancy Wilson of the group Heart, blah, 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 And, I got into, Elton John was one of the real early things I loved, and Wings. And I used to get, if I saw a magazine with Elton John on it, I'd get it.
Right.
And then the next year it was Kiss, and then Aerosmith, and then Zeppelin, Rush, that kind of stuff. Like, I guess I grew up on American FM first, but then I started digging in a little bit deeper.
Yeah. And
Rush was definitely probably, I moved to Florida for a while during junior high, and that's the first time that I heard them. And I used to like draw album covers and name all the songs, and one of the names I thought of was Rush. And then I see this band in a magazine called Rush, and so I like hung their picture on my wall, even though I had never heard them.
Right.
And it's so funny. And then also like I wanted all my songs, my albums would have a book that went with them, and then all the songs would be like chapters. And back then I had never realized about concept albums or anything like that.
Right, yeah.
Like, Tommy and all that kind of stuff had been out already, but I hadn't, that was my idea. And then when I first heard Rush, they were kind of doing that. 2112 was like the first one that I heard, But anyway, yeah, and then also in Florida, they had guitar as a class in junior high. And so that was, I took it,
Yeah.
So I learned how to play, like, She'll Be Coming Round the Mountain.
That's what I was going to ask. What was your
When
first
the Saints Go
song?
Marching In, that kind of
yeah.
stuff.
That was one of my next questions. What was the first song you learned to play? So you answered that for me.
Well, in a way, but here's the other funny. My friends from Charlotte, we had already planned on having a band, and I was going to play the guitar. And then when I moved back, my friend that was supposed to be the bass player had already started playing guitar, and he was a lot better than me. And so I was just like, oh, well, I guess I'll just play bass then. And it was like no more thought was put into it other than that,
Right. So before the Animal Bag machine kicked off, who was some of the bands? What were some of the name of the bands that you had before Animal Bag? And did you always play bass, or was you ever the front man or drums or anything else? Or
I played bass. The first band, which is with that same guitar player I was talking about. His name was Scott Haynes, and we called ourselves Mandrake. And we probably tried to call ourselves a bunch of stuff, but that's like the one I remember the most. And I know we got it from that song Mandrake Root. It's like one of the early Deep Purple albums.
Oh yeah.
And then when we split up, I started playing with Scotty Montagnino and Steve Fenton and Todd Wilson, and we were called Overlord. And we were probably together like 5 years or something.
Overlord. You said David Vincent was in that band also from Morbid Angel?
Yeah. How did you know?
I would do my homework. I'm a huge Animal Bag fan.
He was actually. He was one of the singers. We started out with this guy, Michael Sampietro, and he was sort of a Jim Morrison, Iggy Poppy kind of guy.
Right.
And then we had this guy named Tim Gates, and he was kind of like, well, he wanted to be like Steven Tyler or David Lee Roth kind of guy. And then Wilson was the one who met Stubnick, is what David Vincent's real name is, David Stubnick. I think Vincent's his middle name.
Right.
But anyhow, he's like, man, I met this dude. He looks just like Ozzy, And so we got him, and he kind of had like a baritone, kind of like a Jim Morrison kind of voice,
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, that was the. Then we had a guy named Vince Summers, who was more like a Robert Plant kind of guy.
Oh yeah. Sounds like you had some good company there then. And when you started Animal Bag, who was the original lineup in Animal Bag, and what year did you exactly start?
Well, Boo and Rich had been playing together already with this guy named Tom Griffin and Jeff Stegall, but I didn't really know them then. And so it was just me, Boo, and Rich at first. And I remember the very first practice because it was January 15th, 1985, and it was my friend's birthday that day, and I was going there after we jammed. And so I remember walking in and seeing Rich and realizing that I knew him because he had tried out to be our singer in Overlord, and he had actually made the audition, but he came with as a package deal with this other guy, and we didn't want another guitarist. But I didn't even know Rich played guitar, man, and he's like sitting in there, playing Eruption and stuff, I was like, holy shit,
So, can you tell us why original lead singer Bruce Hatchell left Animal Bag, and what's he up to these days?
Well, Bruce was with us. It was funny because when we were looking for a singer, me, Rich, and Boo, and I had Bruce in mind that he had played in this band called New York, who was like a pretty big metal cover band back then, and they kind of played this circuit like from Michigan to Florida, and I think he had blown out his voice, and anyway, they got a new singer, and so I had him in mind, and Boo, the girl that Boo was going out with, her friend was dating Bruce, and so he had the same guy in mind, and that's basically how we got Bruce. And he was kind of he had a real high register. He was really like into like Queensryche.
Could he hit the notes like that?
Yeah, he was more that type of guy.
Yeah. And well, after and what's he up to these days? Do y'all still keep up? Or?
Yeah, we do actually. In the mid '90s, I ended up working with him for like 10 years. We started out doing like vinyl siding, and then we went and started doing gutters. But yeah, we still talk on the phone and that kind of stuff. We're friends on Facebook, and I don't know, I'll probably talk to him every couple of months.
Yeah. Well, after he departed the band, and how did you come across meeting Shelby native Luke Edwards, and what year did he join the band?
I'm thinking it was like the summer of '88, and Boo was actually the one who met him and gave him the tape. And I remember like Luke canceling, and so I was thinking, oh, he's going to be a flake, and then but it was because his grandmother had died or something.
Yeah.
And so when he did finally come, like a week or so later, he didn't just know the one song he was supposed to learn. He had learned all of the songs on the tape. I think there was like 5 of them. And he didn't even have to hold a lyric sheet, which was funny because Bruce would have to hold the lyric sheet for like months, Anyway, it was, I thought it was great, and the funny part was, like, I had to talk the other guys into it a little bit because they weren't sure, because they were kind of looking for some kind of, Robert Plant or, Paul Rogers or something,
Right.
And I was like, man, he's a team player. He sings in key. He remembers the lyrics, He's got PA, he's looks rock and roll, like to me it was just like, we just wanted somebody that like, to me, I wanted somebody that would just work.
Right.
And anyway, it turned out great, and the funny thing is too, is we ended up like opening for Crocus, like, I mean, he was probably in the band like a month or something, and we opened for Crocus.
That had to be a killer show. Love both bands, you guys.
Yeah,
and
people
Crocus.
totally liked Luke immediately. Everybody. It wasn't like, like, where's Bruce, or anything like that.
Yeah, he's got a great personality, and his talent's just undeniable. So yeah, I could see that. So, all right. So after you guys had got together, you played some shows, got some shows under your belt, and you got some confidence, and so you guys decided to move to L.A. and everything. Was that a hard decision for you to make, or did you have to struggle with that decision, or was it like, oh no, we're going? Was it that easy, or?
No, not really. I think Boo was probably the catalyst of that. And for me, it was like something I would have talked about, but probably would have no action, But Boo was like pretty determined, and I think he probably would have went by himself if he had to. But we already had some friends that had gone out there before us, and anyway, we ended up going. I was real worried, like, that Rich wouldn't show, and then he actually came before Luke,
Yeah.
Like, me and Boo and his girlfriend and Alan Garner were like the pioneer expedition that went out there and got an apartment.
We'll settle the land first, huh?
Yeah.
So
but it was scary, I mean, I had $60 in my pocket when I got there.
Wow.
But, I had a friend's floor I could have slept on if I had to or whatever.
I was gonna
Boo
ask.
had a lot of money, and I hate to say, but it wasn't legal the way he made it.
Mm-hmm.
But, we were that kind of band.
Right.
And so that was like, helped out with all the security deposits, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And he took care of that. He was good like that way. He was the most business minded in the bunch. And then probably Luke would have probably been the next, or he might have even been the most business minded, Where I don't think me and Rich were like that at all,
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask. One of my next questions is, I've saw the documentary such as Decline of the Western Civilization 2, and even Blackie Lawless from Wasp, he said it was so bad out there that he was living off of less than $5 a week, renting a closet. So I take it y'all experienced some of that, or you had it a little bit better than that? Was you able to get jobs, or? Because I've heard back then it was like really, you had to be determined to want it. I mean, it wasn't just these contracts given to bands.
Yeah, I mean, basically you get which is pretty common out there, is like a whole band renting one apartment and everybody sleeping all over the place. So we sort of had that going. I mean, I ended up eventually moving into the rehearsal room because the rent was cheaper, and then Boo moved in with me, like when him and his girlfriend split up, he moved in with me. I mean, I guess it would be that whole starving artist thing or whatever, but, that was what we were there for, we were on a mission or whatever, so.
So how was your feelings when you guys first got signed? I understand that the first time you guys were under the impression you were going to get signed, and the company backed out on you. And the second time, y'all were kind of like playing a show, and somebody showed up, and they liked what they saw. Is that correct, or in the ballpark?
With our second gig, we played this place called the FM station, and then there was like this dude from Warner Brothers was there, and anyway, he ended up contacting us, and so we thought we were gonna, oh hell, a record guy wants to see us, so we thought it was like, it was only our second gig, we were like, okay, we went down there and met him, and it turned out his name was, I think it was Rob Cavallo. Or that his dad was big in Warner Brothers too, and he's the guy who ended up eventually he signed Green Day. But the meeting really was just like, we're going to keep an eye on you, so I guess we made a look, it's kind of cool. We had a little bit of a relationship with Warner Brothers right from the get-go,
Right. But how did you end up going with Mercury Stardog, right?
Right.
Yeah.
About 2 or 3 years later, however long, Warner's finally did, they call it a showcase, and it's basically, we played a show for the whole staff of Warner's, and then they ended up passing.
Oh, wow.
So
that had to be heartbreaking.
And, it's basically like not everybody got it, or they, not everybody could get on board with it or something.
Right.
But like I was really hoping to be on Warner's only because like Jane's Addiction and the Flaming Lips, and,
Right.
like there was some bands on there that I liked, and Black Sabbath was
yeah.
on Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
That sounded really cool to me. But I would have been just as happy if it had been Atlantic.
Right.
Zeppelin was on Atlantic.
Right, right. So after you guys got signed, got the ball rolling and everything, and it came time to shoot the video. What was your thoughts on that? How did you like the process of making a video? Was it kind of tiresome, or did you pump the whole time? Was you really enjoying it, or how was that experience for making the video for everybody?
I had fun, I guess, doing it, but I wasn't as much into that. I didn't care that much for photo shoots. I didn't care that much for, I didn't care that much for interviews,
Right.
But sometimes it was fun, though. You have fun with it.
Right.
I think that, for me, I liked that concerts are cool,
Yeah.
But like really writing song in the rehearsal room, trying shit, and if something comes up that, these tangents that you go on, and it's like, I don't know. Like I remember we'd sit and have like band practice, and somebody would say like, man, I wonder what it would sound like if King Crimson played reggae. And then we would spend the whole practice trying to do that.
Right.
Like, what would that sound like,
Yeah, that's a unique mix. That's awesome.
But, like, we just, it was, we used to play these games, man. Like, somebody would be like, hit a note, and then the next guy hits a note, and then the next guy hits a note, and we'd keep going in a circle, and, like, try to get faster and faster and shit like that, you know? Like,
Yeah. It just didn't. A lot of times
we'd make up rhythms using somebody's name or phone numbers and stuff like that. Like,
so that was a very unique approach. That's really cool. So, out of the Animal Bag catalog, which was your favorite album to record from start to finish?
Well, I think that my favorite was Offering. Just get the vibe of it. It's more, Pink Floyd or something. I just, it felt good, and it's also like, to me, like our mellow stuff was one of our strengths, and I think that it's funny because I didn't write like not one of the songs on Offering, but just because of the vibe of it. And I love, like me and Boog, we'd sit around and get high and analyze, like we'd record our practice or whatever, we'd analyze. And I always thought like, wow, Luke, man, he writes, his songs are better. And it was because Luke was actually writing like real songs, and
Right.
like what we did more was like, write riffs and then put lyrics over them, and then if we had like, we would still try to figure out how to make it like a hook or something, but if it worked, we were lucky, because we would like shoehorn shit and make it work,
Yeah.
But I always thought that that the mellow stuff was a strength.
Yeah.
And like it was easier to play, and you could concentrate on singing, and I don't know, and that's, to me, that was when I I was more excited about that, actually. Even though I liked the rock,
Right.
the next guy, but
Right. Well, my friend, she wanted me to ask you this question. She's a huge fan of the song Mirrored Shades, and you're listed as the songwriter for Mirrored Shades. She was wanting to know what inspired you to write that song.
I remember when I wrote the lyrics was I was walking to Waffle House in the snow, and I was thinking about, because I was trudging through the snow, and U2 has that album, it's called War, and on the inside, when you open it up, they're like in the snow, and so the lyrics were coming to me, but I was sort of using the format of the melody for New Year's Day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I sort of wrote the lyrics to the melody of New Year's Day. And then I remember Rich had just gotten a mandolin. And I remember, like, because he came, like, one day, and he's, like, doesn't know how to play it. And then the next day, he comes and he can play every song that you've ever heard on mandolin. Like, it's like, oh, how do you tune? You know, the first day he's like, doesn't, you know, he's figuring out how it's tuned. You know, and the next day he's like playing, going to California. You know, or Heart. You know, but I had the lyrics, and actually Luke and Rich wrote the music. They were supposed to come over and work on it with us, and I was living with Boo then, and then me and Boo, like, I think we like got drunk or something, but they came over anyway, and then they saw the lyrics, and then they sort of put it together, and then when I did finally hear it, you know, I probably had a couple of suggestions or something, but it was like, here's how we, you know, just more like an arrangement thing. So I didn't really write the chord progression or anything.
Right. So, how did you guys get on the show My So-Called Life? That was a very popular show in the 90s, and most bands would, you know, kill for that exposure. So how did you guys land that gig?
Well, when it was on the pilot episode, so nobody really knows that it's going to be exposure because the show could totally tank. But there's a whole department at the record company, and that's their job, is to try to get you on film, which is whether it's getting your song on a soundtrack or having you actually be, you know, in a movie or film. And so I don't know who was in charge of that, but that's how we got it. I think that somebody from the show comes out and like says, yeah, that band will work fine, you know, or whatever. But what I thought was funny more than anything was like our manager's like, hey, would you be willing to play a band at a keg party? And I'm like, you know, like, that's art imitating life right there. We don't even have to play that like that. We really were that,
right,
know, at one time, you know.
Right. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on Image Damage. I've heard the album, Such a Tragedy, it was never released. Why was this monster of an album never released? I mean, this was like the most crushing album I'd heard. I was just like, I was blown away the first time I heard it. Why was this masterpiece not ever released? And how was it working with Terry Date in the process?
Well, it wasn't released because we ended up getting dropped, you know, and we got dropped along with probably like 12 or 15 other bands, you know, like basically they had, you know, record labels are like banks, and they buy each other out and all that stuff, and then they kind of had restaffed, and, you know, they just look at the books, you know, how many did these guys sell? Oh, okay, let's get rid of them. They don't seem to be doing too well, or whatever. They don't really think about it like they're messing with somebody's life, you know. But Terry Date was very cool. He, you know, we had this list of producers. My manager, you know, said make a list of, you know, I'm such a music geek, like I'm into producers too. So, but we really had our sights set on this guy Dave Jordan, who had done like Jane's Addiction and Alice in Chains. We used to work with Talking Heads and Zappa, and then Terry Date was our second choice, and we liked him because I liked him because Mother loved him.
Not to mention Pantera,
Yeah,
Deftones.
yeah, but that wasn't why I liked him, because of how the album Apple sounded.
Oh yeah.
And it turns out that this guy Tim Palmer mixed it, which is probably more why Apple sounded like it did. And Terry was a way more aggressive, in-your-face kind of producer. But we still, he had worked with Soundgarden, Fishbone. Yeah, I mean, he was cool, man. He kept a bag of weed on the mixing desk. I mean, that was like...
And bands would kill to work with this famous
Yeah.
producer. I mean, he's got such a, resume,
But, I mean, he was cool, though. Like, he invited me to his house for dinner. Like, I think we're friends on Facebook, actually. But, anyway, cool guy.
Oh, great.
Yeah, he was cool. He looked like kind of like Rick Moranis.
Yeah.
And, we had a lot of fun with that.
Right. So, how was the tour when you guys hit the road with Ugly Kid Joe? Were they pretty easy to get along with? Are they pretty cool guys, or did the bands clash, or how was? Because I know you spend a lot of time with the bands on the road like that. So, how did that work out? The two bands.
I mean, I guess we were. A few of us hit it off pretty good, I guess, but. Like, it's not like we rode on their tour bus with them or anything.
Right.
Though we did go in there and, like, get high with them and stuff. I wasn't a big fan of them. But, they were on our label, and the guy who signed us was the one who had worked their album. And that's how come he got to sign us.
Is his name Bobby?
Yeah, Bobby Carlton.
Yeah.
But, they were cool, I mean, I remember, like me and Boo and Whitfield Crane, like, because he was in Ugly Kid Joe and they had a hit, like, we could get into all these places for free and shit. And we're, like, in New York City, like, going in, and there's these clubs where people are waiting to get in, and then we could just walk right in. And then, once you get in there, then you find out there's another room where only the really special people can get in.
Right.
And we could even get in that room because we were with him,
Sweet, all about the sweet hookups, man. So,
but he was also cool, man. He would be on stage and he would like cough up a loogie and then like catch it in his mouth. So I was like, man, that's fucking cool.
And well, while living in California, what other bands did you guys become friends with at that era? I know Funhouse, which I love. I heard you guys were good friends with those guys. Is there any other bands from that era that you guys really clicked with and kind of hung out with a lot?
I mean, none of them that are like famous, but like Tipper Gore, they were a sort of this Metallica kind of Slayer sort of type of band, and we saw that they were playing, and we knew that they were from North Carolina because we had heard of them. So we went to see them, and then we made friends with them. And that's how, like, Luke met Amanda, she was, like, her sister was dating their singer. And, it seems like the Tribal Sex Cult, which they were this kind of, like, Chili Peppers crossed with like Zeppelin and AC/DC. Mm-hmm. But two of the guys in that band were like they were acid heads.
Yeah.
And me and Boo went and it was Carlo, and I can't remember the drummer's name, but he had the pierced nose, and we would go trip all the time,
Yeah.
And so. But yeah, there are a lot of bands. Most of the time when we played with a band, like, I mean, I didn't really look at it in a competitive kind of way. I looked at it more like a brotherhood.
And that's how it should be, A lot of bands want to step over each other, but yeah.
Yeah, I look at it like, oh yeah, for me it's like a bunch of dudes that you can talk shop with.
Right.
And, different kinds of, some people like to talk about gear or whatever. I would rather talk about songs, right. How we write songs, or what bands were into, more so than like, oh yeah, I use a GK 400 RB,
Yeah. So Luke had told me, I'd talked to him before, and Luke had told me that while recording Image Damage, said that you guys met Terrence Trent D'Arby. I'm a huge fan of his as well.
Really?
Yeah. So how was he as a person?
Wow.
Very talented man.
More than once, actually. The first time, when we were recording our first record, we recorded it in a rehearsal studio using a mobile truck. It was called Le Mobile, and this guy Guy Charbonneau owned it, and he was like from Montreal. But it was a pretty famous truck. Like he's recorded in like Rush, and Metallica, and whatever, But well, Terrence Trent was recording or rehearsing a tour or something at that studio, and I kept seeing this. Like now, I can't remember if it was a Rolls or a Mercedes or whatever. And then one day I saw him getting into it, and I had noticed that it had engraved on the handle GBL. So I was thinking that was whose it belonged to, And I'm like, well, what does GBL stand for? And he's like, grace, beauty, and love, That was the first time that I met him. But then a few years later, when we were mixing Image Damage, he was mixing. I'm thinking it was whatever the album after Neither Fish Nor Flesh.
Oh, I think it was.
It would have been like his third album, basically.
Yeah, I think that was after. I think.
Well, anyway, it was this dude named Spike was mixing it.
Right.
So, because we were there like every day, and hanging out, because we didn't live in LA then, so that's where we had already moved back to Charlotte. So I'd hang out there all day listening to stuff, and I made friends with his producer Spike, because Spike was really good friends with Flood, who had done like U2 and Depeche Mode, like all these other bands that I liked, PJ Harvey. Anyhow, so I was always like asking him shit about Flood,
Right, yeah.
But Terrence Trent would come in, and then I would be there with my jam box, and he'd be like, "What's that you're listening to?" So then I'd start telling him, One day it's like the Beastie Boys, the next day it's like Pavement, And he's like, one day he comes in, and then he's like, "I went to the record store, Otis, and I bought all this new shit, thanks to you." And then he him and his like supermodel girlfriend, and we like smoked a joint, in the little lounge, and talked about like the Stone Temple Pilots and all kind of shit. I mean, he was a nice guy.
Right. Well, that's
like,
good.
I don't know how he comes off to other people, but as far as like when I, it's not like, oh, we're like friends now or anything.
Of course.
But he seemed pretty nice to me. So.
Right. Well, this next question, it's a little more, I guess, a little darker, but sadly, there's only 2 members of Animal Bag left now. Could you go into the details about Rich Paris and Boo Ducksworth's passing? And man, that's just such a tragedy that that they passed away at such an early age.
Well, Boo passed in June of 2002, and he lived. This is interesting. He lived about 600 feet that way.
Yeah.
And Rich passed in 2010. He lived about 600 feet that way. And so I'm in the one of the points of I call it the Animal Bag Triangle of Death.
Right.
And I'm going to be the next one.
No, don't say that.
So Luke, he better not like move around here, because this is the zone.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how to like what you're wanting to know about them passing away, but I mean, they were Boo was probably like my best friend. He's sort of like he was like more like my little brother than my actual little brother.
Right.
And you know, Rich. I mean, these are just, you know, two great friends of mine, and we had a lot of adventures all over the place, and for a second, you know, like you're I don't want to sound cheesy or nothing, but you know, you're trying to make your dreams come true, or we share the same dream, or whatever you want to call it. But you know, and it's really, sometimes it's really hard because you're not expecting it. You know, like whatever. For me, when I'm listening to Animal Bag or even M4 Messenger, you know, and I'll get hit with, you know, I'll hear some little riff that Rich plays, or I'll just have some little, or Animal Bag memory, you know, and I'll just, you know, I'll feel fucking tears, you know. It's like, I was watching, you know, that Janice Head February 11th, 1989 video.
Yeah, that's
and then I saw that there was a scene, or a little part where Rich looks back and smiles at Boo or Luke, I can't, you know, and I remember, like, I just fucking started crying, like, right then. Yeah. It was just like, oh man, you know, like I know that, you know, that's like embedded in me, you know, all, you know, for the rest of my life. Right. Those guys, you know.
So when you guys did the reunion show in 2015, the one night show, it was the Tremont 20-year anniversary show celebrating the club's 20-year of business. What was that like? You know, taking the stage. I mean, was it? I mean, to me, it was a beautiful tribute because, I mean, you guys are carrying on, and I know that they would have wanted you to do that. It's just such a beautiful time, like what y'all spent together and the music y'all put out. Just, you know, timeless music. How did it feel up there to be on the stage again under the Animal Bag name?
Of course, you know, you wish that the other guys were there. You know, it's not like me and Luke are trying to, like, you know, we're going to resurrect Animal Bag or anything like that, get some other dudes or something like that. I mean, the funny part to me is, well, that wasn't even the first time we did it. You know, we did it another time because we played a gig with Tater, and we had done it. But for me, it's like I was, especially that first time that we did the reunion, more than the Tremont time, I was all worried about the logistics, you know, like I gotta relearn these parts, and I want to have my part right, you know. And then I wasn't even thinking of the emotional part of it until I walked on stage, and then I saw, like, people out there, and they're like singing, and they're beaming, and they're crying, you know. And it's like, and it just like hit me, you know. It's like, oh, these guys aren't here, but something that they left is here, you know. It's kind of like that sort of immortality that you can get a little bit through music, you know, or whatever. Every time that somebody plays it, or whatever, you know, Mozart, people are still playing his stuff, you know. Yeah. I don't know, man. I wasn't prepared for that though, because I had only been looking at it from, like, logistics, you know, and then until that moment, and then it hit me, and I'm probably more inclined to be like that, you know, than.
Well, I have to tell you, I was in the front row that night, and when you guys just started with the first song, and it was just amazing. I mean, just look around, see everybody having such a good time, smiling, and just loving to hear those songs live again, you know. And it was just like such a beautiful, I thought, tribute to Rich and Boo also, and you guys did it justice, and everybody in the crowd was definitely pulling for you guys. It was just it was a great moment. I'll never forget it. It was just, as an Animal Bag fan, that was a real pinnacle for me. So I just thought that was really nice.
What I like, you know, is that we're still doing it.
Of course.
You know, not Animal Bag, but it's not like we're, you know, in it for life, basically. You know, like we're gonna make music. You know, Luke is he's never stopped. I had never stopped. You know, this is like, you know, it's my DNA. You know?
Right. Yeah, that's correct. And what has been your most satisfying moment in your career as a musician? What was the point that says, you know, this is what I've always wanted to do. This is why I picked up an instrument to begin with. What was that moment?
Wow, I have had so many. One of the things was that was for me touching was I asked the band to play at my daughter's preschool, and you know, I was kind of sheepishly, you know, because it's not like the most rock and roll thing to do or anything. I was like, hey, we all play at my daughter's preschool, and then they did, and you know, we played like some of our mellower stuff, and maybe like a Beatles song or something, but you know, and then Luke would be like talking to the kids in like a Barney voice, you know, in between the songs and stuff. Yeah. But I was just like looking out and seeing my friends doing this, because to me it felt like they were doing me a favor. And then there's all these little babies dancing and shit like that.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was surreal, you know. Do you know what I'm saying? But it went like, I was touched by that. Another really awesome moment for me was we were playing at, I think it was 1313, and we were on tour, but we were in Charlotte, and I think it was like New Year's Eve or something. But we were playing Mirrored Shades, and there's a whole, like the first half of the song, basically, me and Boo sit out. You know, the bass doesn't come in till like the second chorus, the bongos or whatever. And I'm just sitting there on the side of the stage, smoking a cigarette and looking across, and I can see Luke in the middle and then Rich over there with the mandolin. And they're playing this song, and there's all these people, and they know every word. And I wrote those words, for one. But in that moment, just for a little brief moment, I saw that we were as classic as any band that ever existed. You know, all the bands I worshipped and everything. You know, for just like a split second, like I saw that we really were that.
Right. And well, can you tell us what you're up to these days? Can you tell the fans what bands that you're in now, and where we can check you guys out at when your next show is? Because we definitely want to keep the support going. And love don't stop with Animal Bag. It goes beyond that. So we'd love to support your bands that you're doing now also. So.
Well, my main band that I'm in is the one that Rich and I started, and it's called M4 Messenger. And we're, you know, we started it in like 2007 or something, and so we've been going for like 9 years, and the last 6 without Rich. So you know, it's not like you can't really replace him, but we morphed into something different, and it's pretty cool, you know. Yeah. And that's my main band, you know, and then I have this other band with my friend Alex, who's there for all the Animal Bag stuff, you know. And it's kind of you know, right now our jumping off point is stoner metal. I like what the stuff that we're doing lately. It's stretching it a little bit, I guess. But it's kind of, you know, there's an old schoolness to it, and then there's just I like it.
Yeah.
You know, And then I play in this roots rock band called Poor Blue. I play the bass. Yeah, we didn't talk about this, but I played bass my whole life, but like somewhere in my 40s, I sort of switched to guitar. I got because of the way that Luke wrote the songs like Hello Cosmo and all that. When I started playing guitar, I had to start from scratch writing regular songs, and I really got into that. That's why I switched to guitar. And I love to play the bass, but it's just easier to write on the guitar.
Yeah.
I forgot what I was saying.
Well, you was just mentioning what all bands you're
Poor
doing.
Blue. I'm in this. Yeah, Poor Blue, which is this guy Mickey from Ireland, and he writes awesome songs, and it's kind of a rootsy, classic, loose, Rolling Stones-ish kind of rough and tumble, bluesy Americana. And then I'm in this band called Jason Herring and the Mystery Plan, and he's like a local DJ, more like electronic type stuff. But the music that we're playing is kind of more like it's like the mellow side of Yola Tango or Mazzy Star, something along those lines.
Nice.
And his wife is in the band, and then this other girl that plays flute, and they, it's like these girl harmonies, I don't know, it's a chill, very chill, but I love it. And then I have this project that just started with Jamie Hoover, and
he's a record producer, right?
he is a local. He's from was in the Sponge Tones, and he's a great. He knows his way around the studio. I think he's like pretty much like some kind of wizard or something. But anyhow, he and I are doing this. I guess for lack of a better word, we're on our second song right now, but it's sort of like a kind of a power pop or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see, what it morphs into, like.
All these bands, they have Facebook pages and Twitter, so you can be kept up with by the fans and everything.
Oh yeah, the Jamie Hoover thing, we're called the Stepford Knives.
Okay, nice.
And we're on our second song right now, so I'm waiting because he moved to the beach, and so he's sending me the next. What he did, he sent it to me, I put something on it, and I sent it back to him. He's going to put something on it, now he's going to send it back to me.
Right.
So I'm waiting on his next, to see what kind of juju he put on it.
Right. Heck yeah.
Or mojo, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. Well, in closing, I just have one more question, and this Luke told me about this, and I was like, I got to squeeze this in there. Peter Frampton. He told me to ask you about meeting Peter Frampton.
Well, on our first album, him and the guy Guy Charbonneau that owns the mobile truck, they had Frampton had a studio right next door, and we needed to use a Hammond organ that he had in there for one of our songs, and so Guy got him to loan it to us, but none of us had ever messed with a Hammond. And so Peter Frampton came over and helped us set it up,
Yeah.
And Luke's the one who played it, but my tracks were already done, and Boo's tracks were done, so we were like getting drunk. So when Frampton came over, like I didn't recognize him because he didn't look like the cover of Frampton Comes Alive.
Exactly, yeah.
Like he didn't have the curly hair.
Didn't
like
have
he
the
had
mane.
straighter hair, yeah.
Right.
But he still had long hair, but it was straight then.
Right.
And anyway, when I was like, thanks for the help, dude. By the way, what's your name?
Yeah.
And anyway, though, then we ended up talking because I knew he had grown up with Bowie.
Wow.
Like, not just like he played on like the Glass Spiders tour, but like they knew each other since like
Childhood.
4th grade or something. Yeah, And so I'm like asking him all this Bowie stuff because I'm like a Bowie nut.
For sure.
But yeah, we were actually going to get him to try to do a solo on one of the songs. It was going to be City Song, I think.
Oh, great.
And but he had he had something. He was going on the road or doing something that I don't remember, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
We still thanked him on there. So.
Well, man, in closing, I just want to say thank you for taking this time out to do my show and everything, and it's such an honor. Been a huge fan since I was a kid, so man, I can't tell you how happy this makes me to we finally get together and do this interview. And thank you for all the years of great music, and thank you for being on the show.
Well, thank you.
All right.
I hope it turns out. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you.